Greetings, family, and welcome to another edition of KSOL Black Talk Radio, the new black media. Family, this video is about digital jail, how electronic monitoring drives defendants into debt. So on October 12, 2018, a Dewan White walked free, or so he thought. A guard handed him shoelaces and the $19 that had been in his pocket at the time of his booking, along with a letter from his public defender. The lanky 19-year-old had been sitting for almost a month in St. Louis medium security institution, a city hall known as the Workhouse, after being pulled over for driving some friends around in a stolen Chevy Cavalier. When the police charged him with tampering with a motor vehicle, driving a car without its owner consent, and held him overnight, he assumed he would be released by morning. He told the police that he hadn't known that the Chevy, which a friend had lent him a few hours earlier, was stolen. He had no previous convictions, but the $1,500 he needed for the bond was far beyond what he or his family could afford. It wasn't until his public defender, Erica Wurst, persuaded the judge to lower the amount to $500 cash, and a non-profit fund, the Bail Project, paid it for him, that he was able to leave the notoriously grim jail. Once they said I was getting released, I was so excited I stopped listening, he told me recently. He would no longer have to drink water blackened with mold or share a cell with rats, mice, and cockroaches. He did a round of victory push-ups and gave away all of his snack cakes he had been saving from the cafeteria. When he finally read Wurst's letter, however, he realized there was a catch. Even though Wurst had argued against it, the judge, Nicole Colbert Botchway, had ordered him to wear an ankle monitor that would track his location at every moment using GPS. For as long as he would wear it, he would be required to pay $10 a day to a private company, Eastern Missouri Alternative Sentencing Services, or EMASS. EMASS. Just to get the monitor attached, he would have to report to EMASS and pay $300 up front, enough to cover the first 25 days, plus a $50 installation fee. You know, before I continue, let me state for the record that this evil, corrupt system really is against black people. In particular, this slave setup system, because that's what it is based solely on race, and exactly why I continue to refer to it as a racial system. This system is a main reason, not the reason, but it is a reason. I won't even say main reason, because slavery is the main reason, but this system is an addendum, it's an extension of slavery, is why black people, traditional black Americans, American descendants of slaves, are due reparations. Reparations now. This extended slave system we call a justice system that jails black men and then requires us to pay for said jailing. You owe black people reparations. This is evil and corrupt. It's not right at all. But I digress. So Dwayne White didn't know how to find that kind of money. Before his arrest, he was earning minimum wage as a temp, wrapping up boxes of shampoo. His father was largely absent, and his mother, Lakeisha Thompson, had recently lost her job as the housekeeping manager at a Holiday Inn. Raising Dewan and his 4 siblings, she had struggled to keep up with the bills. The family bounced between houses and apartments in northern St. Louis County, where, as a result of Jim Crow redlining, most of the area's black populations live to 2014. They were, hold on, I'm sorry. That was where most of the black population's area's black population lives. My bad. In 2014, they were living in Canfield Drive in Ferguson, where Michael Brown was shot and killed there by a police officer. During the ensuing turmoil, Thompson moved the family to Green Bay, Wisconsin. White felt out of place. He was looked down on for his sagging pants, called the N-word when riding his bike. After 6 months, he moved back to St. Louis County on his own to live with 3 of his siblings and step-sibling in a gray house with vinyl siding. When White got home on the night of his release, he was so overwhelmed to see his family again that he forgot about the letter. He spent the next few days hanging out with his siblings, his mother, who had returned to Missouri earlier that year, and his girlfriend, Demetria, who was 7 months pregnant. He didn't report to EMAS. What he didn't realize was that he had failed to meet a deadline. Typically, defendants assigned to monitors must pay EMAS in person and have the device installed within 24 hours of their release from jail. Otherwise, they have to return to court to explain why they violated the judge's orders. White, however, wasn't called back for a hearing. Instead, a week after he left the workhouse, Colbert Botchway issued a warrant for his arrest. 3 days later, a large group of police officers knocked on Thompson's door, looking for information about an unrelated case, a robbery. White and his brother had been making dinner with their mother, and the officers asked them for identification. White's name matched the warrant issued by Colbert Botchway. They didn't tell me what the warrant was for, he said, just that it was for a violation of my release. He was taken downtown and held for transfer back to the workhouse. I kept saying to myself, why am I locked up? He recalled. The next morning, Thompson called the courthouse to find the answer. She learned that her son had been jailed over his failure to acquire and pay for his GPS monitor. To get him out, she needed to pay EMAS on his behalf. This seemed absurd to her. When Dewan was 13, she had worn an ankle monitor after violating probation for minor theft, but the state hadn't required her to cover the cost of her own supervision. This is a 19-year-old coming out of the workhouse, she told me recently. There's no way he has $300 saved. Thompson felt that the court was forcing her to choose between getting White out of jail and supporting the rest of her family. Over the past half century, the number of people behind bars in the United States jumped by more than 500% to 2.2 million. This extraordinary rise, often attributed to decades of tough on crime policies and harsh sentencing laws, thanks to Bill Clinton, etc., has ensured that even as crime rates have dropped since the 1990s, the number of people locked up and the average length of their stay have increased. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the cost of keeping people in jails and prisons soared to $87 billion in 2015 from $19 billion in 1980 in current dollars. In recent years, politicians on both sides of the aisle have joined criminal justice reformers in recognizing mass incarceration as both a moral outrage and a fiscal sinkhole. As ankle bracelets have become compact and cost-effective, legislators have embraced them as an enlightened alternative. More than 125,000 people in the criminal racial system were supervised with monitors in 2015, compared with just 53,000 people in 2005, according to the Pew Charitable Trust. By far, the most decisive factor promoting the expansion of monitors is the financial one. The United States government pays for monitors for some of those in the federal criminal racial system and for tens of thousands of immigrants supervised by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And while I'm on that point, these ankle monitors really should be primarily used for that instead of being used on American citizens, criminals or not. I think this is another way of using their barbaric ideology onto black people, using these type of invasive apparatus to keep track of people. But I digress. But states and cities, which incur around 90% of the expenditures for jails and prisons, are increasingly passing the financial burden of the devices onto those who wear them. It costs St. Louis roughly $90 a day to detain a person awaiting trial in the workhouse, where in 2017 the average stay was 291 days. When individuals pay EMAS $10 a day for their own supervision, it costs the city nothing. A 2014 study by NPR and the Brennan Center found that, with the exception of Hawaii, every state required people to pay at least part of the costs associated with GPS monitoring. Some probation offices and sheriffs run their own monitoring programs, ching-ching, renting the equipment from manufacturers, hiring staff, and collecting fees directly from participants. Others have outsourced the supervision of defendants, parolees, and probationers to private companies. Yeah, they have a system, a racial system, a racist system set up. Their new slave patrols of high-tech surveillance of black people, when these devices should be used against illegal people who are here in the United States, since that damn wall hasn't been built. These devices should be on those people, not on black Americans, the people who built this nation. This is an atrocity, is shameful. We should start a chant right now. Reparations now. Reparations now. You stole us. You sold us. You owe us. You stole us. You sold us. You owe us. In other words, you brought us. You sold us. You owe us. But I digress. Oh, and let me correct that. Not brought. You bought us. You sold us. You owe us. Correction, my bad. Continuing quote, there are a lot of judges, and this is a problem, black people. This is a major problem in this racialized, corrupt, evil system that they call a justice system. There are a lot of judges who reflexively put people on monitors without making much of a pretense of seriously weighing it at all. They don't even weigh the consequences at all. They just reflexively put people on monitors, said Chris Lackey, Albin Lackey, a senior legal advisor with Human Rights Watch, who has researched private supervision companies. The limiting factor is the cost it might impose on the public, but when that expense is sourced out, even that minimal break on judicial discretion goes out the window. Well, EMAS may have saved the city some money, but it also created an extraordinary and arbitrary seeming new expense for poor defendants. When cities cover the cost of monitoring, they often pay private contractors $2 to $3 a day for the same equipment and services for which EMAS charges defendants $10 a day. To come up with the money, EMAS clients told me they had to find second jobs, take their children out of daycare, and cut into disability checks. Others hurried to plead guilty for no better reason than that being on probation was cheaper than paying for a monitor. Do you hear these results? And white people know this, and this system that's set up against us black people, they try to pretend like they have no idea what's going on. And as we awaken black people, it's time the righteous people of the earth to start standing up and saying no to this evil system. It's time. At the downtown office, White signed a contract stating that he would charge his monitor for an hour and a half each day and report to EMAS with $70 each week. He could shower, but was not to bathe or swim. The monitor is water resistant, not waterproof. Interfering with the monitor's functioning was a felony. So do you hear the big setup? This is the big setup. So that way you make sure that they make sure that you fail, black man. The righteous of the earth, that is. You see, they try to make that crime as a black thing, but I say look to those who were in Africa before we came into contact with Europeans. We didn't even have that word in our vocabulary. Things didn't start happening to black people the way the white people show it until we came into contact with them. Isn't that a coincidence? But I digress. Critics of monitors contend that their public safety appeal is illusionary. If defendants are intent on harming someone or skipping town, the bracelet, which can be easily removed with a pair of scissors, would not stop them. Studies showing that people tracked by GPS appear in court more reliably are scarce, and research about its effectiveness as a deterrent is inconclusive. Quote, the fundamental question is, what purpose is electronic monitoring serving? Said Blake Strode, the executive director of Arc City Defenders, a nonprofit civil rights law firm in St. Louis that is one of several firms representing the plaintiffs in the Bell lawsuit. Quote, if the only purpose it's serving is to make judges feel better because they don't want to be on the hook if something goes wrong, then that's not a sensible approach. We should not simply be monitoring for monitoring's sake, unquote. Electronic monitoring was first conceived in the early 1960s by Ralph and Robert Gable, identical twins, studying at Harvard under the psychologists Timothy Leary and B.F. Skinner, respectively, influenced in part by Skinner's theories of positive reinforcement. The Gables rigged up some surplus missile tracking equipment to monitor teenagers on probation. Those who showed up at the right places at the right times were rewarded with movie tickets, limo rides, and other prizes. Although this round-the-clock monitoring was intended as a tool for rehabilitation, observers and participants alike soon recognized its potential to enhance surveillance. All but 2 of the 16 volunteers in their initial study dropped out, finding the too bulky radio transmitters oppressive. They felt like it was a prosthetic conscience. And who would want mother of all the time along with you? Robert Gable told me. Psychology today labeled the invention a belt from Big Brother. The reality of electronic monitoring today is that Big Brother is watching some groups more than others. Very true. No national statistics are available on the racial breakdown of Americans wearing ankle bracelet monitors, but all indications suggest that mass supervision, like mass incarceration, disproportionately affects black people. Now, that is a very probable and likely assumption, for sure. In Cook County, Illinois, for instance, black people make up 24% of the population, and 67% of those are monitors. The sociologist Simone Brown has connected contemporary surveillance technologies like GPS monitors to America's long history of controlling where black people live, move, and work. And that's coincidental she would say that, because earlier I said that this was an extension of the slave patrols, and she summed it up very nicely in modern terms. In her 2015 book, Dark Matters, she traces the ways in which surveillance is nothing new to black folks, from the branding of enslaved people and the shackling of convict laborers to Jim Crow segregation and the home visits of welfare agencies. These historical inequities, Brown notes, influence where and on whom new tools like ankle monitors are imposed, and thus another nail in the coffin as to traditional black Americans' demand for reparations. So lastly, the combination of GPS location data with other tracking technologies such as automatic license plate readers represents an uncharted frontier for finer grained surveillance. In some cities, police have concentrated these tools in neighborhoods of color. A City Lab investigation found that Baltimore police were more likely to deploy the Stingray, the controversial and secretive cell phone tracking technology, where African Americans lived. In the aftermath of Freddie Gray's death in 2015, the police spied on Black Lives Matter protesters with face recognition technology. And you wonder how some of those Black Lives Matter leaders and activists ended up dead coincidentally, burned up in their car, and then said to be a suicide. But I digress. Given this pattern, the term electronic monitoring may soon refer not just to a specific piece of equipment, but to an all-encompassing strategy. If the evolution of the criminal so-called justice system is any guide, it is very likely that the ankle bracelet will go out of fashion. Some GPS monitoring vendors have already started to offer smartphone applications that verify someone's location through voice and face recognition. These apps, with names like Smart Link and Shadow Track, promise to be cheaper and more convenient than boxy bracelets. They're also less visible, mitigating the stigma and normalizing surveillance. While reducing the number of people in physical prison, these seductive applications could, paradoxically, increase its reach. For the nearly 4.5 million Americans on probation or parole, it is not difficult to imagine a virtual prison system as ubiquitous and invasive as Instagram or Facebook. This is the end of this story. I hope you learned something, because I sure did. For those of you who think I waste my time on the few views that I get on my videos, no, I learn a great deal when I do my videos, because knowledge is power. whether you accept it from me or not. This is KSOL Black Talk Radio. We'll see you in the next video. Peace out.